What's up guys, how's it going? Welcome to another video here on the channel. My name is Júlio Chagas. In today's case, I'm going to talk about Edmund Kemper, one of the most famous serial killers in the United States, whose crimes are still reverberated today. So, let's go to the video. Edmund Kemper was born December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. His parents were Edmund Kemper II and Clarnell Stage. His childhood was troubled. His parents got divorced when he was only 9 years old, and his mother was very abusive. At school, he was bullied a lot due to his height. He was about 6'4" when he was only 15 years old. Because of that, he developed several aspects of antisocial behavior, from his childhood to his teenage years. Kemper used to torture and kill small pets, such as cats and dogs. He would also dissect them, claiming he was only curious about what their insides looked like. There was a time Kemper even buried a live cat, later digging it up and then decapitating it. Whenever he was questioned by his family, he would deny killing the animals, confessing later he would enjoy lying to his family about it. It is known that the construction of a figure with psychopathic traits not only involves genetic and intrinsic factors, but also the environment and daily exposures in which the individual is inserted. In this case, the environment was quite a trigger for the emergence of someone like Kemper, especially because of the relationship with his mother, an alcoholic who, according to reports, always humiliated him and dealt with him in an extremely abusive way. But since every story has its two sides, Kemper's mother claimed to be afraid of her own son and felt insecure about letting him live with her other two daughters. It is known that he once told one of his sisters that he was in love with one of his teachers, and that to get a kiss, he would have to kill her. Kemper's mother's solution to this was not the best. No consultation with psychologists and psychiatrists. The solution she found was to force her own son to sleep in the basement several times, later moving his room there. Among the committed abuses, his mother refused to show affection for her son, fearing that this could make him become a homosexual. She also said that no woman would ever love him because he was so ugly, gangly, and ridiculous. Kemper once described her as a sick and angry woman. As you can imagine, he was not at all happy having to deal with all this contempt, and his family didn't know how to deal with a child out of social access and with dark thoughts. The situation was quite complicated. A solution found by Kemper himself was to move in with his father, with whom he had a better relationship. He fled at age 14 to his father's house in Van Nuys, California. His father welcomed him with open arms, which made Kemper very happy. However, this happiness didn't last long. His father's second wife, Alfred Weber, and her son from the first marriage, Gilbert, had problems with Kemper. And then, when Kemper was 15, his father took him to spend Christmas with his paternal grandparents. When Kemper was there, his father told him that he would move in with them without any notice. Kemper was extremely sad and angry about this. Right after he came back, Kemper's father changed the phone number so that Kemper wouldn't bother him anymore. Kemper's grandparents were Edmund Kemper I and Maud Kemper. They lived in the North Fork, California. According to Kemper, his grandmother was controlling and always mistreated him, while his grandfather was a calm man and always treated him well. However, he didn't interfere in the way his wife treated him. On August 27, 1974, Kemper and his grandfather started arguing in the kitchen. Kemper, then furious, took the rifle his grandfather had given him as a gift and went out hunting. His grandmother from the house started screaming for him to come back immediately. Kemper then returns home. When his grandmother turned her back on him, he shoots her in the head. With her on the ground, he shoots her twice more in the back. Then he takes a kitchen knife and stabs her several times. He then wraps a towel around his grandmother's head and drags the body into the bedroom. A few minutes after his grandfather arrives, Kemper goes towards him pretending nothing happened. As soon as his grandfather turned his back, he also shoots him in the head, and then he drags the body to the garage. Kemper cleans up the entire crime scene unhurriedly. Then, he calls his mother and tells him what he did. His mother tells him to call the police. When the cops arrive, they find Kemper sitting in front of the house. He then informs the cops where the bodies are, and he's taken away. At first, the police thought it was a crime of passion, motivated by disagreements or anger in the heat of the moment. However, Kemper told the police that he had killed his grandmother just to find out what it would be like. As for his grandfather, he said he killed him so he wouldn't know his wife was dead. All his testimony was said in a cold and rational way, as if he was in total control of the situation. He was diagnosed by psychiatrists as a paranoid schizophrenic and sent to a Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility that houses mentally ill criminals. But not everyone agreed with this diagnosis. Hospital doctors reported that Kemper did not have any kind of reality distortion or dark thoughts. They claimed that Kemper was very smart and talented. He got a 142 score on IQ, and his diagnosis was changed to personality disorder, something far less harmful than the previous one. Kemper knew better than anyone else to manipulate the tests and doctors around him. The relationship at the hospital had reached a level where Kemper had become a sort of helper for doctors to help them develop tests to apply them to other inmates. Having access to the tests and even helping to develop them gave Kemper the power to circumvent the results of his own tests, convincing doctors that he was not the monster that some people might imagine. In December 1969, at the age of 18, Kemper was released on parole from boarding school. He decided to move back in with his mother, against psychiatrists' recommendation. In 1972, 3 years later, he was deemed fully rehabilitated, and his criminal records were all erased. Everyone considered him emotionally stable and didn't see him as a risk to himself or others. And of course, everyone was wrong. Kemper admired the police officer career ever since he was a kid, and dreamed of someday being part of the corporation. He even tried to become an officer, passed all the tests, but was not accepted due to his height, that was over 6'7", not allowed by the police at the time. With this rejection, he found comfort collecting firearms and knives. In addition to collecting guns and knives, at the age of 20, Kemper bought a Ford Galaxy 500. This purchase was not random. He acquired this car because it was the same model used by the police force at the time. At home, the relationship with his mother was increasingly troubled. She would humiliate him every chance she got. One of Kemper's other distractions, besides collecting guns and knives, was giving rides to girls who were still in school. It was a very unusual distraction, but he liked to do it so he could be around women. According to Kemper, he would have given a ride to about 150 girls before starting to feel murderous impulses and killing them. He also reported that most of the crimes were committed after the arguments with his mother. The psychiatrist said that, in Kemper's mind, these young women were his mother, and because he didn't have the courage to kill her, he transferred the frustration and anger about his mother to them. On May 7, 1972, Kemper drove through the city of Berkeley, California, when he found two girls and offered them a ride, promising to drive them to Stanford University. These girls were Marianne Pesce and Anita Lucchesa. Both were 18 years old. Kemper had prepared his vehicle to commit the crimes. His victims could not leave unless he wanted, and he had a secret compartment where he hid weapons and bodies. He took them to a secluded spot in the woods, a place he already knew well. He then handcuffed Mary and locked Anita in the trunk. He strangled and stabbed Mary. Then he took Anita out of the trunk and did the same to her. Kemper then hid the two bodies in the secret compartment he had under the trunk and decided to return home. On the way, he was stopped by a policeman because his rear light was broken. The officer asked for Kemper's license and did a little search on his car, but he found nothing illegal and let him go. Back at home, Kemper took photos of the corpses, had intercourse with them, and then dismembered them. Later, he placed the body parts in a plastic bag and left it on a mountain area. On September 14, 1972, at a night, Kemper offered a ride to Aiko Ko, a 15-year-old student who had missed the bus for her dance class. He did the same thing again and took the victim to a secluded spot with no one around. He then pointed a gun at her, curbing any reaction she might have. At the scene, Kemper ended up locking himself out of the car by accident, but for some reason, certainly by threat, Eiko opened up the door to Kemper. He gets in the car, sexually violates her, and then suffocates her to death. Afterwards, Kemper placed Eiko's body in the secret compartment below the trunk. But this time, instead of going straight home, he decided to stop at a bar to have a few drinks, with the body still in his car. When he returned home, he repeated the same atrocities he had done to previous victims. Again, he had sexual intercourse with the victim's body, dismembered it, and discarded the remains in a similar location to the previous one. On January 7, 1973, Kemper was driving near the University of Cabrillo campus when he spotted a girl and offered her a ride. This girl was Cindy Shaw, an 18-year-old student who was going home. Following the pattern of the other crimes, Kemper took Cindy to an area of dense, isolated woods. As soon as he arrived, he fatally shot the victim with a pistol, and then he placed the body in the secret compartment and returned home. That day, his mother was home, so he decided to hide the body in his closet and left it there all night. In the morning, after making sure he was alone, Kemper had sexual intercourse with the corpse and then dismembered it. He did the whole thing in his mother's bathtub, which he said was very symbolic. Kemper threw the body's remains off a cliff, but he kept the head for a few days to satisfy himself sexually. When he got tired, he decided to bury the head in his backyard, right in front of his mother's bedroom. The explanation he later gave about it was that his mother liked to be admired by people, and then he decided to leave the victim's head there, with their eyes turned towards the room, as if they were admiring her. On February 5, 1973, Kemper left home determined to find victims after a strong argument with his mother. At a time, the students were already on alert and knew about a serial killer who offered his victims a ride. As a result, they were advised to accept rides only from cars that had a university sticker on. The misfortune was that Kemper's mother worked inside the University of California, and then somehow he got one of the stickers and stuck it on his car. Kemper was driving around the campus of the University of California in Santa Cruz when he spotted two girls. They were 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe and 20-year-old Allison Liu. According to Kemper himself, Rosalind got in the car first, which made Allison feel safe, eliminating any fears she had about him. After getting in the car, Kemper took the gun and fatally shot both of them, right there on campus. Soon after, he wrapped them in blankets and returned to his mother's house. Still inside the car, he decapitated the bodies and took them indoors, where he had sexual intercourse with them. After he was done, Kemper dismembered the bodies and discarded them as usual. Every time Kemper used his gun to kill the victims, he took the bullet out of the body to make investigations difficult and not get caught. On night of April 20, 1973, Kemper's mother comes home late from a party. She was drunk and ended up making a lot of noise, waking Kemper up, who, very angry, got up and went to the door of his mother's room. He stared at her for a few moments. Then, Clarnell looked at him and mockingly asked if he would spend all night there. He looks at her, says no, and leaves saying good night. Kemper just went back to his room and waited his mother to fall asleep. As soon as she did, he went downstairs and took a knife and a hammer. He went back to the bedroom and started beating up with a hammer. Then, he took the knife and cut off her head. He did to his mother's head the same thing he had done to the other victims' heads, including the sexual intercourse. Not satisfied, he still used the head as a dartboard. He did this for an hour or so. When he got tired, he crushed it with his feet. Kemper even removed his mother's tongue and larynx and threw it in the crusher, which failed to crush and ended up breaking. Kemper later said that he did it because his mother was a person who only knew how to scream. After that, Kemper hid his mother's body in the closet and later went to a bar nearby to have a few drinks. Soon afterward, he returned home and called his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sally Hallett, inviting her to dinner and then watch a movie. Upon arriving, Sally was strangled by Kemper, who took her body and hid it in another closet. Kemper then fled with his car, driving non-stop to Pueblo, Colorado. He expected to be the target of a major police hunt. He left with several guns and ammunition, in the belief that he would likely face a possible confrontation with the police. However, the cops didn't know about his latest crimes, let alone that he was the serial killer. Kemper ended up getting frustrated, as he believed he would appear on all TV news and that he would have all eyes in the country on him. When he realized that none of this was going to happen, he went to a phone booth, called the police, and confessed to his crime. The police didn't take his confession seriously, thinking it was a prank call, and then mockingly told him to call later. As Kemper had already tried to become a police officer, he was friends with some police officers he met during that time, from which he developed friendships. So, hours later, Kemper called the police again and asked to speak to one of the officers he was friends with. In conversation with this policeman, he confessed all his crimes, including where were the bodies of his mother and her best friend. The police then went to Kemper's house. There, they found the bodies, and this time they believed him. Kemper gave his location to the police and waited for them to arrest him. At the police station, Kemper's explanation for turning himself in was that by killing his mother, all the anger and hatred he felt had ceased. According to him, he no longer felt homicidal impulses and that the deaths lost all their meaning. Therefore, he had no need to keep on hiding his criminal record. On May 7, 1973, Kemper was charged for 8 murders. On November 8 of the same year, he was sentenced to life in prison. The jury and Kemper himself asked for the death penalty, but the state of California was undergoing a transition from a ban on the death penalty, and so his sentence was converted to life imprisonment. In prison, he attempted against his life twice, but guards saved him by taking him to the infirmary. Kemper's story influenced many works in the movies and in the literature. Among them, one of the most famous is The Silence of the Lambs, which later became a screenplay and then a movie with the same title. Kemper also appears in the Netflix series called Mindhunters that debuted in 2017. In the story, he helps agents from a special FBI division understand how a serial killer's mind works, with the goal of using this knowledge in future investigations and helping the capture of criminals like himself. Today, at the age of 71, Kemper is considered a model prisoner with exemplary behavior. He has already done several jobs in prison, including handcraft with ceramics and reading more than 5,000 hours of books that were recorded on tapes for blind people. He has also given several interviews to police officers and journalists, and says he intends to help in the hunting and preventing crimes from people like him. He also said that he's not proud of his crimes and understands that jail is his place, as the society out there is not yet ready to receive someone like him, and that he does not blame people for it. In 2024, when he is 75-year-old, Kemper will have a new parole hearing. He has had numerous parole requests denied for failing the psychiatrist's evaluation, and in some of those evaluations, he didn't even attend. If the doctors declare him as someone who no longer represents any danger to society, he may be released. Thanks for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay well. I'll see you next time.